flinch. I don't think that those TVZs really say anything about how this one's gonna go. So let's just find out. Let's take a little journey together, shall we? As we're loaded into Glittering Ashes. In the bottom left, we have the blue Zerg player. Don't look at me like that, Kev. It's dark. I can't get Raynor out of my head.
In the top right side, we're looking at the main base of a man who took a very early extractor and also a very early spawning pool. It is Dragon Phoenix Gaming's Rogue. You know you're getting old when you forget how the Zerg gas is called. An extractor, there we go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly he wants to take the assertive stance in this game. If he was being attacked by any sort of later pool, he'd be in a nice spot to try and at the very least get in there. But for Dark, quick hatchery. Kev, we might be seeing this one get resolved quickly, regardless of which way it ends up going.
Yep, I've seen this build being used quite a bit, mostly by Denver in the European qualifications and even in the DreamHack Masters. Denver is a very big fan of this one. Make no mistake, Rogue's opening is incredibly committed here. There's obviously plenty of early spawning pool openings where they just expand and they try to get a little bit ahead. But now it's a gas and a spawning pool, which means Rogue is going to make a lot of links and he's going to throw down a very quick bailing nest as well. All of one base. So this is it, guys. This game could be over in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. But it's gonna, in both sides, by the way. If Rogue doesn't find the damage he wants to find, he might just step out. If Dark mishandles this, if the bailing connections get a little bit too big, it could also just be game over for Dark. So we'll all see. At this point, Dark has no idea yet that this is happening. He's going to send one drone to the low ground. I think the most important thing here, Nate, is that Dark needs to get a spine crawler up as quickly as possible and ideally in his main base.
Yeah, I was going to say, look, the Queen only just now starting for Rogue, even with how early he had that pool. So he's very committed to putting everything in on this. Those Zerglings need to take as much time hitting that hatchery as possible, though, if he wants to break that down. The Baneling Nest is ready. Will he just morph the Banes right here in front of him? I think he wants to keep the Ling DPS on the hatch, though.
What I'd like to point out here is that Dark drops his Baneling Nest before he gets his own Zergling speed, which I do think is a correct decision because you want to get some Banelings. The big downside of this is that it's going to take a long time before Dark will have his own Zergling speed, and he's probably going to be forced to be a one-base Zerg for a while. But if we look at the work account right now, Dark is still at 19 drones against 12 of Rogue, so losing this hatch sucks, but it's not even the end of the world. It will all come down to the Banelings. The Broodlings get one cancel and do not get a second one, I believe. So that's 3 Banelings, 1 Queen, 1 Spine Crawler. Here we go.
He's got a couple of the Lings held position between where that Baneling Nest and the hatchery is, too. So Dark attempting to limit any possible path that could be used for Rogue to try and reach those drones. Of course, I mean, if you're able to get those Banelings on the workers this early, that could be devastating. But Dark still has the worker advantage. It's still 1 base versus 1 base. Yeah, he lost the hatch, but Kev, for him right now, it's just about surviving.
I actually really like this defense so far by Rock. I think that Rogue, by a split of 1 Zergling to the top of the main base of Dark, and it's 2 Lings even, they could have potentially morphed into Banelings. So it's really important that Dark picked up on this. But I think so far so good. Dark had many different ways of dealing with this, but he says, you know what, I'm okay with losing my hatch because I know I have way more drones with this opening than you do. It's going to take a little while before I maybe secure my natural, but at least I've got Spine Crawlers, I've got my own Baneling Nest, I've got 2 Queens out already. Dark is making a complicated scenario seem pretty simple here, to be honest.
Yeah, just a couple of Queens with these Banelings. Of course, if you dive in on those this early, and 1 Baneling connection can pretty much end the game, and then all of a sudden you flip Lings back out the other way. You already mentioned it, Kev, the money in a nice spot for Dark, but Rogue goes straight to the lair.
That is an 18-drone lair. Now, that's not something I see very often, so...
He's been, I don't know, he pulled out like some evil Bly build from, I don't know, well, Dark's going to get his lair up nice and fast too here.
Yep, that's actually very quick as well. 25 drones and his natural is only halfway done. So these guys clearly trying to get up to lair as quickly as possible. Could maybe turn into a Muda versus Muda game. Could also be used for some Queen Nidus down the line. But at this point, we don't have an evolution chamber for +1. We don't have a Roach Warden, so it kind of screams Muda versus Muda to me.
Yeah, we're in a weird spot. At this point, you don't even... I guess you'd be just using the main base gas, because getting the worker count up, I mean, obviously you want to get the mineral income going, because you weren't even at the full base of saturation until that last wave of drones finished. But getting the extra extractors and the natural is going to cost some of those drones, and there it is. There's the Spire from Rogue, so it's going to be straight up to those mutalisks that we were talking about, Kev. And it feels like It feels like there's just some weird mind games maybe even going on between these two with just how quickly they both kind of sprang for the same thing. They clearly have an expectation that this could have been the option for either of them.
Yep, and it is going to be Spire versus Spire. Dark is actually getting a couple of extra spines. He misread this because he scouted the natural of Rogue. He's like, well, you've got very few drones in your natural. So what I think he's slightly worried about is that Rogue has been banking up Zerglings at home. Potentially has like 28 links pocketed in his main base that he now sends over to the other side of the map. Because these spines are completely unnecessary. And he already has 2 spine crawlers as well.
It's not cheap either.
No, this is a bit of an overreaction. I hope for Dark that he decides to cancel them, but that scout, in a weird way, it worked against him. He thinks he's the one with the quick Spire, but his opponent's Spire is even quicker, and Rogue is now creating a little worker advantage for himself. I do believe the spines have been cancelled, unless they finished up real quick.
Finished.
No, they finished up quickly, damn.
That's, no, you're 100% right, Kevin. And we knowing that the Spire, with our vision, our wonderful observer Nyal, keeping us up to date on everything, we know that it's going to be Mutalisks coming out for Rogue. So those spines will not be very useful. Down the line, of course, you have some protection eventually later on. And it's not like he didn't have a good economic position at the start, but you're kind of giving some of that up by making these investments in static defense. And he starts Carapace, but the Mutas are only just now. Just that one Muta is starting for Dark. So Rogue he's definitely going to be able to take that first punch towards his opponent.
Yeah, but Dark does have quite a bit of gas banked up, so I think by the time that all the Mutas of Rogue make it to the other side of the map, I feel that Dark should be able to get his own Mutas out. The current Queen count is 3 against 2, so Dark does have 1 additional Queen. And what he does have going for himself is that he's got a much quicker 3rd hatchery. So I actually think it's still pretty even though I feel like it should have been a lot better for Dark than what it actually is because of the 2 ultra unnecessary spines.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. He does have, I mean, of course, like we said, he moves some of the spines forward, so you have a little bit of extra defense against the Lings, but usually they're going to come in huge numbers with some Banelings if it's going to be a ground attack. And so with both of them getting the Flyer Carapace, well, Kev, we know that these games get super weird, because like you were saying, by the time the Mutas cross the map, especially since he did stop to kill the Overlords, he didn't just go straight for drones or anything like that.
Nice save.
As Lings save the drone on the 3rd for Rogue. But Muta versus Muta gets a little bit funky, doesn't it?
Yeah, it gets really funny, especially because spellcasters are incredibly good against high number of Mutas. So then the big question is, when is the right moment to maybe drop an Infestation Pit for a couple of Fungals? That'd be awesome. But let's not even talk about how good Parasitic Bombs really are. One Baneling gets a good connection here, but it doesn't do anything because these Banelings don't have the one-shot potential. You need at least 2, and there are no additional links to follow it up either. Yeah, I kind of wonder who is going to be the first one to drop an Infestation Pit and feel like they've got the courage to go up to Hive. Because 1 or 2 Para Bombs, Nate, and Mutas are suddenly not that intimidating anymore.
Yeah, well, unless you're talking about an incredibly highly viewed Serral highlight. Splitting against Parasitic Bomb with Mutas, not super easy. Having to click 2 or 3 out of a pack of 30 can be an incredibly tough ask.
Mm-hmm. Both these guys kind of strike me as brute force Zergs, though, where they're just like, yeah,
yes.
we could tack up, but we can also just make more units and duke it out in the center of the map. It is just incredibly even at this point. The Muta count at this moment slightly in favor of Rogue, but obviously Glittering Ashes is a very big map, so by the time that all the Mutas of Rogue would even think about flying to the other side of the map, Dark is already going to have a Muta advantage just because he's the defender, and then maybe Queens can help out a little bit as well. So just a very even game.
Yeah, the rally distance combined with the Queens, like you were saying, and that's why we're not seeing either player try to force the issue just yet, because, of course, the last thing that you want to do is bleed out too much on the other side. So I think we're seeing now +2 Flyer Carapace starts for Rogue, but it's +1 attack for Dark.
Yeah, that's different. And I'm not sure what I prefer. We do know that when it comes to Muta versus Muta, getting Carapace first is better because of the way that the Muta attack works. It bounces all over the place and then armor kicks in multiple times. But when it comes to +2 Carapace or 1-1, I'm actually not quite sure what is supposed to be better. And what's funny as well is about Muta versus Muta, we often focus on who's got more Mutalisk or who can actually tech up to Infestors or Vipers. But Lings on the ground are very important, because if you win the Ling fight on the ground, then obviously your Lings can still be there and they can soak up a little bit of that splash damage. And that obviously means that your Mutalisks stay alive a bit longer.
Yeah, it's really interesting to consider, because that extra bounce damage, like you were talking about, obviously the extra armor upgrade kind of negates it in Muta versus Muta, but having the attack upgrade is still going to be nice because the ground units don't have the Carapace upgrade. So getting the extra bounce damage means that if you win the Muta fight or if you're able to get Harass in, you'll at least kill everything else a bit faster. But for Rogue, it maybe helps a little more against getting poked by something like Queens, or if he decides to use Corruptors at some point, they'll be really tanky. But
this could be a nice window, by the way, because now he's got 1-1 and +2 Carapace is nowhere near done yet. So Dark is going to pick off a couple of Overlords. At this point, Muta count dead even, but obviously Dark with the superior upgrades, he's going to find a couple drones here. I don't think Dark ever wants to lose his hatchery, but I also don't think he wins a Muta fight here.
Yeah, Rogue has to be incredibly patient. Just, okay, you can have a couple drones, have those, take that Overlord. Like you were saying, Kev, the other risk of going for the +2 is that it does take longer to research than +1 for either side, but does have the Queens to throw a little assistance, and that will be enough to buy him a few moments as Rogue's going to send a bunch of these Lings onto the counter attack. There are some Banes still here, but splits between the main and the natural. Gets one Queen, go for drones. Ling's going to counter back into Dark's, or excuse me, into Rogue's base at the same time, going for the Spire right as he starts that +2. Dodges the Baneling, tries to get right back on the surround. The Mutas are coming in to save the Spire, and they shall. With just a handful of hit points remaining, it will stand strong. So his +2 Flyer Carapace, he's going to boot that back up immediately. Meanwhile, Rogue heads towards the Hives.
Yep.
Roddy, those Vipers, if he goes for them, will be a little harder to pick off with that +2 like we were talking about, since he's made that investment into those upgrades. I am a little surprised with just the fact that we have 42 Mutas versus 40 Mutas, that he hasn't, while this Hive is researching, at least started +1 attack for his Mutalisks.
Here we go. That's going to be a very big Muta fight. Dark knows that his opponent is spending some resources into going up to Hive. The Queen's really helping out there with a couple of transfusions, and Rogue still has by far superior Muta numbers. Rogue is absolutely dominating this fight, and Dark is going to be almost forced to tap out, Nate, because Dark doesn't have that Hive on the way. So Rogue is the one transitioning and the one winning the Muta fight.
The bounces are just completely worthless with the +2 Carapace that he has.
Wow.
You start to win that fight a little bit, and it's close. It's like, oh, 40 to 42, but then it becomes, 39 to 35, and then all of a sudden it's 30 to 15, and well, that's a hell of a way to win a game. Talk about taking control, though. He starts off with the early pull, starts off with that fast Banelingness as, look, if you're being greedy, I'm just going to instantly win this. And even though he wasn't able to win outright, he made sure to kill the natural hatchery, and then despite having the less economic opener, was still able to get more Mutalisks out with the better upgrades just in time for that big fight.
I actually think, like, if you go back in this game, it would have been a lot better for Dark to really push the issue when he had +1 Flyer attacks and +1 Carapace, and his opponent only had +1 Carapace. Because there were 2 Queens there, but at that point they didn't have a lot of energy either. And I actually think at that point I felt that Dark could have potentially won the fight, but that didn't quite work out. Maybe Dark felt that his hand was forced because he saw with his Lynx that ran into the main base, whoa, you've got an infestation pit. That means Hive's on the way. I don't have an infestation pit yet, so I'm going to force the fight here. But yeah, the numbers are just too damn close. Obviously, Rogue's going to have reinforcements. Transfuse makes a really big difference in some of these fights, because then these Mutas will just never die against bouncing Glaives. And a fight that was supposed to be close turned out to be not all that close.
Yeah, I also really like it, as we saw that little replay again too, Rogue it looks like he keeps Mutas on hold position, so he doesn't miss any attack. It's like a worker versus worker fight where it's like, oh yeah, you can try to micro, you can try to be a little fancy, but you usually miss out on 1 or 2 volleys, and that can end up costing you as well. But a good, really, really good decision making by Rogue. Still such a weird game that we had this early pressure, and then it's like, no roaches, no hiders, no defensive, no Nidus, nothing like that. We're both just gonna go right up to Mutalisks.
Yep. And it also really sucks for Dark that he misread it a little bit. It's actually really sad where you scout and you're looking for information, but then the information you receive is actually not the right one or not what you're looking for, because he saw only 6-7 drones in the natural, no extract is taken, and he's like, whoa, I've seen this before. What you've probably done is maybe you pulled even a couple of drones of your main, but meanwhile you're sitting on 35, 40 Zerglings in your main base. You're about to send them over to my side of the map. I'm the one who's going for a Spire. I need extra Spine Crawlers, and we all knew that he really didn't. So a little bit of a misread by this man that perhaps costed him in the end, but there were still some opportunities. He's down 0-1 in this upper bracket match of Group C at the DreamHack Masters Winter 2021 Season Finals. Our Korean Zerg representing Dragon Phoenix Gaming, it is Dark.
Both players going for some quick pools, and this man in the Northeast presently leading 1 to 0, also representing Dragon Phoenix Gaming. He is Rogue.
I just hear Lambo in the back of my head, Korean ZVZ. Because I actually don't know what Rogue is going to do. It could just be 12 pull into an expand. I don't know if he made one drone before he dropped that pull, actually, because it feels a little bit later. So maybe it was like a super defensive 13, 14 pull. It should normally favor Rogue. But if he doesn't get any gas, his opponent obviously does have a gas, so Dark is most likely going to go for the exact same build as Rogue did in the previous game. And if Rogue just goes 12 pull expand, then I actually don't really know how this works out. Rogue is going to need a spine crawler, obviously.
Okay, so he's able to get the Lings out quickly, obviously, right, with the fast pull, but 2, 3 drones going.
He's gonna pull the drone. So Rogue wants to 12 pull and pull the drones and build spike crawlers in the main base of Dark. But Dark is 12 pulling his opponent with Ace. Oh my god, with an extractor as well.
Is it? Does this put Dark into a weird spot because he
Rogue
invested the drone into the
needs
gas?
to go back immediately. Yeah, I mean, it's weird for both of them, obviously, because Rogue is now, damn it, why did I go for the drone pull?
And it's like, not exactly mining a whole lot of resources in that situation. So, what even happens from here, Kevin? It's such an awkward spot to be. He's going to try to take this hatchery, and there is still time before Ling speed's done, and we have to deal with Banelings. But especially since he goes to that drone pool, doesn't have the early minerals. The queen isn't even on the table yet for him.
But what Rogue didn't know at first, if this was a 12 pull gas list or with a gas. Now the Overlord has confirmed, whoa, you've got no hatchery. And that actually means that this is supposed to get pretty difficult for Rogue. But what he does have is a lot of Zerglings out already. So Dark can't just morph 3 Banelings in the face of Rogue, because then he actually loses the Ling fight, right? Because Rogue has more normal Lings than Dark, and these Lings are looking for those morphing Banelings. Technically finds them, but a little bit too late. And here we go.
Even if he could just pick one of them off in the middle of the field there would be nice, but the obvious advantage of having that Speedlings, he can get around, he's more mobile. The Spine Crawler is not yet done, and all of the Lings, like you were saying, Kev, they're not all here, so Spine is going to die straight up. No cancel. Queen is away from the hatch, and we might be going to a tied series very quickly here, ladies and gentlemen, as that Bane blows up. The drone's all ready to get into fisticuffs with the Lings, and there it is. GG Dark brings us to 1-1.
You know, I think this all could have worked out well for Rogue if he would have known that Dark was doing the same build as he did in the first game. But I think the way that Rogue read this as first is like, you're going for 12 pull into expand. Like, you don't have a gas behind this. You're just trying to apply some pressure on me going hedge first. We're going to trade a little bit, but I'm actually just going to expand them myself. And then suddenly it's like, oh my god, you don't have a natural. That means I need a spine. But the spine was a little bit or quite a bit later than what it could have been. And on top of that, it was very exposed right on top of that ramp.
It's interesting to think about the way that he responds to the realization of the fast pull from Dark compared to how Dark responded to him in game 1. Because Dark's, he went for the spine crawlers when he kind of realized what was happening, but he built them in the mineral line, right? He was ultra defensive. He was willing to give up the natural, but Rogue he tried to build that spine super far out forward. The Queen wasn't anywhere that it could block between anything, so there was no way to guarantee that he could finish his units against the Lings.
This spine could have been so much quicker. If Rogue would have just known what Dark was actually doing, I think that spine could have been done. That could have been a second spine. But of course, it's very hard to compare the scenarios of game 1 versus game 2. Because in game 1, Dark went for hedge first, a couple drones, a gas, and then a much later pull. So then you have all those extra drones. In this game, Rogue went for a 12 pull. So he obviously doesn't have that many drones, right? You can't really 12 pull and also build 2 spine crawlers. But I do think if he would have known what was actually happening, it would have probably gone very different.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever good for Rogue, because he's obviously the one without Link speed. He doesn't have a Baning Nest. I don't see how he can ever defend his natural. So I think Rogue is technically always in trouble. But yeah, in this scenario, he was in all the trouble.
It's fair to say that if your build is going to involve pulling all of your workers, that you're not exactly counting on having to
defend,
transition, or exactly. You're like, I'm gonna kick it, and then all of a sudden it's 70-mile-an-hour winds. You're like, well, my kicker's still on the field. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So we're tied up as we move to Berlingrad and spawning in the southeast. The man getting the edge here on the mind games in game number 2. In blue, he is Dark.
And in the top left side, we're looking at the main base of that other Korean Zerg, also representing Dragon Phoenix Gaming. Was ready for a 12 pull and a drone pull, but then had to pull all the way back home because he was the one being attacked first. This is Rogue.
Well, look at that, Kev. We managed to get ourselves to game 3 with about 11 total minutes of StarCraft, maybe, to get us here. And now all tied up. One game to decide it.
And for all the people out there that love stats, that also means that our 2-0 streak at the DreamHack Masters Winter Season
We did
Finals
it!
is broken. We had 7 best of 3s in a row, 5 yesterday, 2 today, that all ended 2-0. And I actually think maybe one of the last ones in the first day was probably a 2-0 as well. But it was at least 7. Finally, we've got a 3-game series. I do gotta mention though that I don't think this will continue, and I'm already ultra pumped for Saturday, because that's where we will get a stacked bracket, a proper stacked bracket. There's just no way that the top 8 won't be feisty, and there's absolutely no way that we're not gonna get some bangers on Saturday and Sunday.
No, I could not agree with you anymore. That's always the hardest part of the group stage, right? You come in, obviously, based on seeding, there's always going to be a couple real powerhouse titans. And, I'm sure, got a lot of fans of Marine Lord, a lot of fans of Special that have been tuning into today's broadcast, but it's just hard to overcome players that are not only this mechanically good, but just as far as strategy goes, they're very decisive in terms of when to bring that aggression, and they're never going to doubt themselves or think twice about going for these types of attacks. And the fact that you even have something like a big drone pull, spine rush type thing in your playbook just means you 100% believe in yourself that you can make that strategy work when you need to.
It's a classic between these two at this point, though, because that's how they got to all their draws, right? I almost wish that maybe the Overlords and the Lynx would have missed each other, where Dark is like ready to bailing boss bro, but then there are like 2 drones left over in his main because he's already building spine.
What on earth happened here?
Well, speaking of what on earth is happening here, that is a very quick lair once more. 2 minutes and 43 seconds into game 3. Rogue fires up the lair. This is Berlingrad, though, so I really don't expect him to just make nothing and go straight into a spire. I think this is a very good map with some roaches with +1. Can these Lynx get the key scout off? The answer is no. But at this point, Dark may be like, hey man, what are you trying to hide? And also, why am I going up to 3 bases? You're not going up to 3 bases. But I am honestly expecting a lot more of +1 roaches here coming out of Rogue than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something he has to keep in mind. Like, we could already have it, right, being built inside of the main base if the Lynx aren't able to get there. But of course, he's going to use this to wall off at the front with the evolution chamber. And Rogue's got a couple Lynx just slipping around the outside as he gets that Baneling nest. So for Dark, the Baneling nest is obviously not going to be crazy useful against the Roach potentially coming in. And with the lair timing, you should be able to get a really fast Roach speed. That +1 makes things hard, but I really like this. So Dark's going to get +1 Carapace, so at least his Zerglings, with the way that this will line up, should be a little more durable than Rogue's expecting.
Yep, absolutely. +1 is a very big attack for people that don't watch CVZ all the time. If Roaches get +1 missile attack, they can 2-shot Zerglings instead of 3-shotting Lynx. And Roaches obviously don't attack as quick as Marines with Stim, so that's a very big difference. But if the Lynx get +1 Carapace, then it goes back to 3-shotting the Lynx, and that really makes Lynx a lot more feisty if you're Dark. And it seems like Dark has a pretty good read on everything that is happening so far. Rogue, of course, has had a few more drones, but it's a tiny bit deceiving because he's doing all of this of 2 bases, and Dark is already well set up on 3 bases.
Yep, and there is a Spire. So he's getting into that Roach setup. I mean, the investment's been made. The Lynx come up to the front. I think he should be able to see Roach foreign. It's jiggling, it's wiggling. There is a lair. And in the back of his mind, he has to know that the option for the follow-up into Mutas is on the table. But at the same time, still needs to be cautious about the Roaches, and he's going to start to build his own as that Carapace upgrade gets closer to finishing. But if it turns into Roach versus Roach, then that attack upgrade becomes a little more valuable than the Carapace.
Now, Dark has not tacked up yet at all, and he's now firing up 8 Roaches himself. I have a hard time believing that all of this is defensive. Dark does hit a random supply block, 74 out of 74. So that means 4 Overlords, 5 Overlords now on the way. I almost have the feeling that Dark just wants to send everything he has to the other side of the map. If he goes right here, right now, there's a good chance that he shows up right before the Mutas actually reach critical numbers. But I think that supply block kind of ruins his timing, Nate.
Yeah, that's a long time to have to wait. And I think another part of it, too, is he's going to start to morph some Ravagers. He still wants to use the Lynx, because that Carapace upgrade is going to make them able to tank a decent amount of shots if the Roach numbers from Rogue are a little overwhelming. He can try to do surround, prevent the retreat, and a couple slow lings. We'll try to see if there's anything else over in that natural, but they're not going to find it.
Here we go. I mean, Rogue was kind of faking his move out, you know, hoping to obviously scare Dark a little bit, and Dark's like, yeah, please do it, because I'm so ready for it. But the first 5 mutas are already on the way. If 5 mutas right-click on these Ravagers, they won't live for a very long time. Rogue does know that there is a good chance Dark's going to have a few more units than him, and that's why he's going to build these Spine Crawlers. I don't know if Dark can kill Rogue here, man. I honestly feel like he's just a little bit too late. If he wasn't supply block, settling for this hatchery is not what he wants to do, because he's got no Spore Crawlers at home, no Lair at home, doesn't have too many Queens. So I really do think that Dark needs more than this hatch, but I also don't think he's going to get more than this hatch.
And Kev, I mean, you called it. The mutas come out, immediately right-clicks on the Ravagers, of course. Well, I mean, Bile can hit air units, but you're not hitting Mutalisks with Bile. You're not hitting Mutalisks with Bile against a top Korean player. It's just not going to happen. So at the very least, pushes back. Now, as you said, 0 Spore Crawlers, so able to get a little bit of hurting on the drones. The Carapace not doing too much to keep the workers alive against these bad boys. And +2 attack, as you mentioned, the Lair coming into play once again. Rogue can end up with a massive upgrade advantage and start to really turn things around as he gets his roach count up.
The hatchery got cancelled, then Rogue tried to take it again, but then gets cancelled again. But the fact that Dark has 0 spores is just so bloody painful. I mean, he's got 4 queens, but not even that is a overwhelming amount. And it's not like Dark's got this crazy muta flock, but it's just kind of a weird game right now, because Rogue has 53 drones. That looks fantastic, but it's 53 drones on 2 bases. That's a lot less fantastic. And it's also very hard to get a hatchery up, since Dark still has 77 Zerglings running around the map.
Yeah, he's got a lot of map control, but doesn't have too much of an answer for the tech. As we've been discussing, he's going to be able to get another couple of Ravagers, which would be really big. Every single one you get here is so nice. The Queen's forced to come out, burn that energy, transfusing. Says, okay, fine, I'll take some Overlords. And hey, Overlords have kind of been a problem for Dark. He's going to have to start 4 more now, as he's capped again.
Yeah. I do think it's better to lose the Ovis, I guess, than losing mining time and all those drones at home. I'm actually a little bit surprised that Dark didn't try again to get another cancel on this hatch. Because sure, roaches are good, but nobody feels comfortable moving out with like 15 roaches against 77 links. That's just a few too many. What did you just kill there?
I think this is Baneling Nest.
Alright, I guess he, just to make it a bit easier for the queens to roam around.
Open some surface area up, perhaps. Needs a little more mobility against these Mutalisks.
Slightly surprising to see him kill a Baneling Nest when he's got 74 links. I mean, I guess he never wants to get Baneling speed here or something, but I don't know. When you have 74 links, I prefer 74 Banelings now.
I'm not going to argue with you on that one, Roddy, but well, you know what? I'm also not going to question the Korean Zerg that if he thinks he needs to kill his own Baneling Nest, then sure, I guess there must be a good explanation for it. But
just
tons of roaches coming out for Rogue. Remember, he has that +2 attack already done. So as that +1 Carapace boots up, he'll have the upgrade lead for a short moment, since Dark does not have to catch up on the armor.
I'm a little bit sad that Dark right now just has still those 70 Zerglings. He's got 74 links. They're just sitting at home. I would like to see them just run around. I'm not saying they should take a fight. Shouldn't go for a run by, because you can't run into a guy that has this many defensive roaches. But for instance, this hatchery that's going up at 12 o'clock right now, I feel like we should have vision of that. Like, if you have only 5 links, Nate, there's not much you can do about it. If you've got 70 links, come on, man. Like, these 70 links should have been able to
run circles around this one.
Yeah. They should have been able to jump on the drone that was trying to morph into hatch. He's sending 1 link to the top side right now, and then I think he's going to send everything else. But that hatch has been going up for quite some time now. The HP is very high, and if the roaches move over, I don't think you can kill it anymore.
It'll be very difficult to find that cancel now, especially as the creep connects the base with the third, and those roaches are able to more easily maneuver. Of course, we can't forget, Rogue still has these Mutalisks, so while there is a Hydralisk Den, and he's be moving into Lurkers, Infestation Pit, the Mutas are still going to be crazy annoying. You have to bring almost all of the Queens, otherwise 1 or 2 are just going to get picked off. That would be a huge grab for Rogue, just to shave off a little bit of that, since that affects the production. Of course, that could spread the vision, etc. And then he transfuses up towards the front. Denying every little bit of gas is going to really make it hard to get those Lurkers out, Kev.
I mean, this is kind of a funny game as one Muta does get picked off there. I mean, Dark is going to be the one with Lurkers first, but it's so hard to be aggressive with Lurkers if you don't have those hive upgrades. We all know the massive power spike that the Lurkers get if Seismic Spines and Adaptive Talents finish up, but that's just going to take a little while. So Dark is like, alright, I'll just go up to hive and I'm going to see take this base in the bottom, and I hope your Mutas are not on top of it immediately. I guess if the Queens get over there or we get enough creep there, one Spore Crawler should be good enough.
Ooh.
As Rogue is going to drop a Nidus network already. That's kind of cool.
I like that. I mean, the Mutas can get him vision wherever he needs it, right? If he wants to put the Nidus outside of one of the bases, of course, that's an option too. But if this army for Dark is too out towards the front where there's a little gap, if he uses the Overseer, for example, and kills maybe one of the creep tumors inside of the main base that are giving vision, and he just doesn't see it for a moment, then the next thing you know, that hive could be getting sniped or something. So definitely something, one of those fun things you like to see in ZVZ, because the Nidus can really make things get insane when you've got roaches spilling in and out of main bases like that.
Whose late game do you prefer? When you think of ultra late game ZVZ, Lurkers, Vipers, those kinds of wars, do you prefer Rogue or Dark?
I think I do like Rogue. I don't know. I don't think of either of these guys as bad at any stage of a game of StarCraft, which like it's very hard because I think of both of them as like really good aggressive players that can kind of play any stage of it. I don't have as much Zerg brain folds as Lambo to give you the 300 IQ answer you're looking for, Kev, but I think that whoever can position the lurkers best around where those roaches are going to be is going to get the big advantage, because it's so hard to play around with that splash damage. Trying to push through the choke, those biles actually landing on the roaches, and he's going to snipe that top base. Kev, the Lings finally pay off, but there's the Nidus Worm inside of the main.
Yeah, but there's also a Lurker on the low ground already that's going to be able to get plenty of shots off. Rogue, if you want to do this, you got to be very, very committed. Rogue does really want to do it as he's moving towards the ramp. We've got so many Queens here. We need to heal up the Queens a little bit. Couple of very nice corrosive balls. But I do think that Dark should be able to hold this without too many issues. At the same time, though, he is taking some damage in the natural at the bottom base as well. Those are just the Mutas. But I think after all of this is done, I think Dark is going to be fine here, Nate. I really don't think he's in as much trouble as the minimap makes it out to be.
Yeah, it didn't really seem like that big attack with the Nidus in the main actually did a whole lot. The Lurker, especially like you were saying, helped a decent bit. Wasn't able to get biles on that. And while he did kill this bottom hatchery, the one on the top was still a bit of a problem. He got the third one too, though. And this is the strength of it, even if he didn't get as much damage. By having the Mutant still alive, he'll always be able to go in and try to create those opportunities again for himself. And denying this space again would be huge, because regardless of how much we like Dark's position, his economy has been shattered.
Yep. I thought losing one base completely acceptable. I did not expect him to lose this one as well.
No.
So I think Dark right now needs to tone it down a notch, and this needs to stabilize. Try to maybe get a couple of Vipers out. Try to turtle up a little bit, which is obviously scary when you know that your opponent killed 2 bases, you only killed 1. But at this point, we're so close to maxing out that I don't think that 1 minute of mining is going to make all the difference in the world. It's a lot more important to just get the stronger army, get more lurkers out, and ideally find gas for Vipers. But it is very hard to find gas for Vipers when you're only mining on 4 extractors.
Excellent point. Excellent point. So Adaptive Talons is done for Dark. Rogue has Seismic Spine, so that's the burrow upgrade, the range upgrade. And the thing that does terrify me a bit is those roaches in the Nidus, you know, it set him up for a good player with denying that economy. It didn't do too much damage in the main. But if he gets a Nidus Worm with something like Lurkers in the main base, or you're able to cut that ramp off to the natural, then all of the tech is suddenly in huge danger, and you don't have a lot that you can do. And we see it even here. Being able to very safely shuffle those lurkers around the map is always going to be a huge problem for Dark to deal with.
Yep, I really didn't hate it at first for Dark, but the moment he lost that triangle base, I'm like, uh-oh, now we kind of need to find a victory somewhere, but he was not able to find a victory. Rogue was bulletproof at home. He's doing an amazing job and still being annoying with the Mutas. These Mutas could potentially get a little cancel on this hatchery as well. That's just gonna...
Mutas are MVP, Kev. Yeah. Mutas MVP this game. They set up the Nidus. He's been able to keep his overlords even to give more of the vision, just because he has the air control. And even if they're not necessarily killing the armies, it's just made the Nidus play so much stronger. So he starts to siege up southwest of the triangle base like we were talking about. And he even used the Nidus to block that hatchery the first time he tried to make it. Now, we do have another worm going inside the main, so he's pulling the attention. He's trying to be annoying, but Dark, he's leaving some roaches around these expansions. He doesn't want to get quite caught off guard like that again. And now the Muta's actually running into the Queens.
Yeah, the Mutas have been MVPs, and I guess eventually it's not too bad for Rogue to get rid of them, though, because I much rather have a couple of extra Vipers and Lurkers than those Mutalisks. I'm a bit surprised that Rogue is still working with 0 Vipers. He's been the one that had superior gas income for quite some time. He does have more Lurkers, as the Roach is not quite getting in range of that one, as we have Rogue making an attack here, but this seems a little bit stubborn. If I'm Rogue, I would chill for a little bit, mate. Get some Vipers. Playing ultra late game ZVZ, I know we're not there yet, but we're almost there. Without Vipers, seems crazy to me.
Yeah, that worm did get shut down. He immediately goes for another. And at the very least, he's holding like 15 or so supply over there. Now brings the majority of the lurkers towards that north expansion. And Dark has had to really spread out his forces. Keep in mind, I think those roaches do have the burrow upgrade as well, so should be able to get the hit points up with some burrow moves if he needs to help sustain this prolonged attack. And there's the Nidus to give the even easier rally forward. Dark kind of being choked out on 3 bases now, Roddy.
Yep, Rogue is just going for pure brute force, man. He's got double the lurker count, but he doesn't have any spellcasters. We do have a couple of lightning clouds going down. These roaches won't live long, but the lurkers are surviving. And while all of this is happening, Dark is setting up a counterattack on the other side of the map. He's going to take out a hatchery, but Dark needs to make sure that he doesn't lose any lurkers because he only has 6 against the 10 of Rogue. But Vipers are really good. I wouldn't hate an Abductor or something. I don't know if we have any energy, but...
He used most of it on the blinding clouds, makes things tricky as those other lurkers in the southwest did quite a bit of work. And this actually would be quite big. I'm not going to say that the Nidus won him the game, but he's been using it as a tool to distract and pull Dark apart so much. Taking that option off the table actually gives a little bit of breathing room to the Blue Zerg player, but it's still been a rough spot because this 4th base has been mining for a huge amount of time. The roaches will finally be able to get
Dark
over there. He just burrows these drones immediately.
They're both playing really good, but I gotta say Dark is making a lot out of very little now. Because if we take a look at the income advantage over the last 5 minutes, you ask yourself, how is this still a game? How is Dark hanging in there? And how has Dark managed to get to an even lurker count? He was at 5 lurkers when Rogue was at 13 lurkers. Almost 3 times the amount. At this point it's 10 against 11, but now Rogue does have his own Vipers, so he should be able to get some better trades. But I gotta say, I'm very impressed by Dark's ability of hanging in there.
Yeah, great display of tenacity by Dark. As you were saying, Kev, he's been taking a beating economically, and the fact that Rogue hasn't been able to turn that into the dub, I mean, I feel like it's got to boil down to, and we can see these roaches come back for another counterattack, it has to boil down to a little bit the lack of interest in going for those spellcasters. As you've brought up time and time again, the Vipers MVP on Dark's side for that big fight. When Rogue tried to push the ramp, he was able to blinding cloud most of the lurkers, and sure, that doesn't kill them like going for the Abducts, but sometimes you're not able to focus them down. Sometimes they're able to pull back. But what's really going to decide this one is the spellcaster control for Rogue, because he still has everything that he could possibly want. But now he needs to turn that into a real advantage. There you go, 3 lurkers getting pulled inside with the blinding clouds on the backside of that, still making it very awkward, which is Vipers pulling each other in mid-air. And as these lurkers continue to approach the base, another blinding cloud goes on the ones towards the front. Roaches and Hydras coming from the back, limiting the effectiveness of that AoE, and the supply cap is going in favor of Dark.
That was actually a sick hold, man, because I was like, okay, you can deal with the first wave, but can you deal with the second wave as well? The answer was yes. Rogue even abducted one of the Vipers of Dark, but wasn't able to kill it off. And we take a look at the unit's lost resource step, it really goes to show that this man is making the best of absolutely everything he has. Rogue has now lost 9,000 resources more than Dark, as this hatchery is going to be in a bit of trouble too. Obviously, Rogue is still absolutely in it, but he's going to have to clean up these fights a little bit. I feel like he's been so eager to get Dark out of there, but turns out it's pretty hard to get Dark out of a game he doesn't want to tap out of.
Absolutely not. You know, we can't see the future, Roddy, but apparently the GOATs could. Dark is taking it to Rogue in this final game and making it look like, we could,
It gets a bit weird when you're calling me the GOAT when I'm sitting right next to you, Nate, but I do not mind it. I did pick
You're the GOAT of my heart, Kev.
No, I mean, this game is far from over, but it's 20 lurkers against 3. And if Rogue couldn't win when he had...
21 lurkers!
Yeah. And if Rogue couldn't win when he had 15 lurkers against 6, I have a hard time believing that he's going to win with 3 against 21. But he is still the one with all the bases, and it's still going to be hard for Rogue. Bloodbath. Where's Pig when you need him the most?
He's a psychopath!
I love Pig.
Oh, you have 21 lurkers. It doesn't really cost you a whole lot to spread a few of them out like that. And he gets a great pickup in just a little random spot. He says, yeah, you want to throw your roaches around the sides of the map? Well, I've actually got those covered too. And he's going to walk up towards that northeast corner and say, okay, well, as we've kind of discussed a few times, Rogue's advantage has been money, but he hasn't been able to turn that into a serious lead beyond just having more money. He's losing the fights. The Viper control from Dark's been insane. And look how many Vipers he's got right here. Full energy, tons of blinding clouds available, and now with the amount of lurkers that he has, 27 lurkers. I don't know what you do about this. Is he like, I don't know that there's any safe way to try to transition into something that's going to break that, Roddy.
I would normally say you want to outmaneuver them, but it's very hard to outmaneuver
27 lurkers.
You're always going to
Good
find a
God.
couple, Nate, no matter where you
He's
go.
at the 30 mark now. He's at the 30 mark.
Now, I think it's super smart what Dark is doing as well with the Vipers. I honestly think the more the merrier. There is no EMP in this matchup. There is no feedback in this matchup. So the only real counter to the Viper, I think, is the Viper, to abduct it into your own unit.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and that's why the Rogue is getting a couple extra too. Now, what's the magical number? I don't know, but I really don't think 7 is overdoing it. That may very well be the sweet spot. Of course, you want to make sure you have enough battle units. But at this point, the army of Dark is just better. And on top of that, it's bigger too. Because Rogue has 83 drones, which is awesome. But that's not going to help you in the big fight. Because that obviously means that Dark's going to have 20 extra army supply.
And he's got so many spore crawlers up front as well. There's not a whole lot of easy ways to engage this. You would think to yourself, man, I wish I had like, you know, an air unit try to break this siege. But then with the Vipers, you're still worried about Abduct. You're still worried about Parasitic Bomb. You can't just try to transition into something else, because at this point with these types of army compositions, the best option is to you have to just out-control your opponent. You just need to win on the micro front, and both of these armies are certainly capable of doing it, especially even though he has so many lurkers. Dark has them spread out. He's trying to cover multiple parts. So if you're Rogue, trying to attack means you have to find the soft spot. But that is not going to be easy when you've got 14 spore crawlers in front of 30 lurkers.
33. We already had a man making 10 Colossus in this tournament.
Lurker madness.
But I don't think I hate the 33 lurkers as much as I hated the 10. I actually kind of like it because I'm looking at every other unit you can possibly make. Which one is better? I can't think of any. Once in a blue moon we see Broodlords in this matchup, then they get abducted into Spore Crawlers, and we realize why Broodlords are not a thing in this matchup. So Lurker Viper truly is kind of the end goal. I don't think any of them ever had like the real possibility to do anything else. Sometimes you see some cool things with Ultras and Banes, but that works against a couple of Lurkers.
Well,
You're gonna abduct each other, but this favors Dark because he's got way more Lurkers.
And he has the spore crawlers too. So even as they pulled each other, he actually threw blinding clouds onto the Hydras and just pulled back because of how clumped up they are. But the spores, you know, they can move around, but he's not clumping them all up together. So he was able to get a nice trade there against Rogue's Vipers, burning through some of that gas bank. But at this point, Dark has managed to get himself to a nice economic position as well, sitting at 2,000. I mean, Rogue's got a little more minerals, a little less gas. It's still anybody's game, but it feels like Dark has really been in the driver's seat for a while, Roddy.
How high can we go when it comes to the lurker count as we're making 4 more? Is there a thing as too many lurkers?
The limit does not exist.
I don't know if I've ever seen a top tier ZVZ where one player legitimately has 36 lurkers. We're almost.
I want to see 40. Let's go.
We may make it up to 50 at this point, man. If Dark just feels that I've got all the upgrades I want, I've got the units I want, I'll make some more static defenses. That means more supply for Hydras and Lurkers. Rogue is getting Adrenal Glands and Melee, so maybe eventually he's thinking about doing something cool with his massive mineral bank that he's gonna assume that he's back up. But we know how Ling run-bys against Lurkers go. They don't go too hard.
No, I mean, you can't really run anything past the Lurkers. He does get a couple of nice abducts there. That's what we need to see out of Rogue. And perhaps that was a bit of a tell earlier on that he wasn't in such a rush to try and get those Vipers out. Maybe not as comfortable because Dark has definitely been getting the better end of most of the trades so far. But now we start to see a little bit of ground being gained. And I mean, what more can you ask for, Kev? It's a split map, ZVZ. We've got a field of Spore Crawlers and Lurkers, one in the same screen as another field of Spore Crawlers and Lurkers.
Well, Dark is actually going to be a little bit aggressive here with a couple of Lurkers. There's no Overseer or Spore Crawler nearby. Careful with the Roaches. We're going to have to split these Roaches up a little bit. Lurkers are really, really good, but with that split, I guess it's going to be good enough for the Roaches. So Dark will lose a few units. Obviously, he lost a couple of Vipers too. Where's that Overseer?
Ah.
Ay, ay, ay. Oh.
Well, Lurkers are one of those units you look away for the wrong moment, they barely find a different little spot to hide in, and the next thing you know, 2 of them, I mean, could have actually killed all of those Roaches if he hadn't positioned himself a little bit better, and that does draw the attention away. He's able to abduct a few of the Lurkers that are in that northeast corner expansion. But where do you go from here? Dark's going to rebuild some more of his Lurkers, continue to add spores and whatnot, but Rogue has Adrenal Glands. He's getting melee upgrades. Weirdly enough, Ling Speed's going to come after Adrenal, which is something we do rarely get to say in a professional StarCraft 2 match. Yet,
I didn't even notice.
Here we are.
I don't think Rogue noticed that either, because he actually made quite a few links already.
Yeah, he started it right as the slow Lings ran over to the lurkers. He's like, this is not ideal.
We're gonna have a couple of lurkers. This bottom left side base is very important because this is the only base on the map that nobody has mined from yet. And obviously this is a base that's supposed to belong to Dark because Rogue has the top right side. So if Rogue has the top right side, Dark is obviously supposed to have the bottom left. Otherwise Rogue is gonna end up with 2 bases more than Dark. And no matter how good the traits of Dark are, he's never going to win. These are just not things that we normally ever talk about ZVZ because I feel like there's always an opening in ZVZ. You can always break your opponent. Well, apparently you can break the man who's just sitting back and building nothing but lurkers, spore crawlers, and vipers.
You put 2 titans of ZVZ and 2 titans of late game against each other. Huge grabs on those vipers. Great abducts. Grabs 5 vipers. Oof.
Yeah, that's an oof moment. Maybe even yikes.
Well, giga yikes.
I don't know if I would go gig up. 2 lurkers get abducted, only one of them does go down. Rogue does manage to sneak a couple of these +1 links.
This is the nice part of going for this, right? Especially with the adrenal glands, you can rip those buildings apart. If you had the +2, maybe you'd even be talking about trying to snipe this before the Hydras get there. But Dark does make that defense. However, he's not gonna have to worry about that. And we see the tongues flying across for both sides. All the Vipers, I believe, for Rogue getting grabbed. Dark has just been on point, kills 9 total for 4 of his own. Those gas units, well, I guess we're going to eventually reach the point where this map is mined out, Roddy.
Yeah.
That's where we're headed, which means every little bit that gets picked off like that becomes so much more painful. Dark, we know he's got no shortage of lurkers.
The hive? No, I do think he's going to get the hive. No,
well, the Hydras are still there.
We left a couple of Hydras behind, so we're going to burrow these circlings. He does get the lurker then, so that's obviously quite cool, but he's losing bases now, and this actually brings me back a little bit to that very famous BlizzCon game between Rogue and Serral, where I felt Rogue threw everything he had at Serral, and he just couldn't break him. Well, he couldn't break Serral back then, and I don't feel like he's breaking Dark in this game either.
Good counterattack, though, from Rogue.
Yeah,
he's able to dislodge those lurkers from his base. He can take the corner map. This is it, right? It's the only uncontested base, or the only unheld base, I guess, by either player so far. Actually, Dark is going to be able to get back over there to try and hold it down. Now, is this enough Lings to deal with the Hydras? Because if he gets that hive, we talk about that's a huge priority target. The Vipers are very important for that, of course, being able to continue to produce those. I think you start to get to that place where maybe you morph a few of your other hatcheries around the map just in case, because, you know, he doesn't have a whole lot of time to work with. He actually did already have another lair. Good heads-up play by Dark, and he's already building another backup lair.
Yep, and he also already rebuilt the lurker then as well that he assumed he was going to lose. Now, the lurker count is not that impressive anymore. It was a lot higher once upon a time, but it's definitely not that impressive on the side of Rogue either. Rogue is only down to 6 lurkers at this point. Meanwhile, Dark still has 15, as Dark has a couple of lurkers. He's going for run-bys, and he's actually finding some pretty good fights. Rogue wants to do something about this base in the bottom left side. I don't know if he quite has the numbers though, especially not if Dark starts sending his reinforcements here. We're losing Vipers to Spore Crawlers, Nate. That's not what you want to see if you're on Team Rogue.
Absolutely not. He's going to throw a parasitic bomb onto the Viper as well. Just say, get the hell out of here. I don't want to deal with that at all. He doesn't really have the lurkers. The defender, there's no detection over here on this base, so these lurkers just constantly putting themselves into the primary transit points and getting big grabs. Here we go. Just Vipers parasitic bombing each other now.
I mean, the banks are pretty much gone, but the Dark still has a very powerful army, and Rogue's army is really not that impressive anymore. He's going to try to rebuild 11 Hydras and 5 lurkers one more time, but I look at all these Vipers on the side of Dark. Only 1 on the side of Rogue. I just don't really see how Rogue ever wins a fight. I don't think Rogue is going to win this fight.
He's got a lurker on the high ground there too. Well done. GG, Dark.